There's been a lot of really hype stuff happening for League right now. We just got Lilia, the new patch has dropped and it's proving to be pretty spicy. We also just got teasers and reveals for Yone. There is a lot of stuff that's going around. Don't let all of that distract you from the fact that we still have to deal with what's going on for this patch. So here I'm going to be bringing you the top performers for 10.15. Don't forget to go check out our website where we have a 50% off sale going on right now, where we have tons of guides that are all done by challenger level players on just about any topic that you can ever need. That includes many of the champions that we're going to be going over today. Make sure to share your thoughts about who you think are the top performers and what you think of the top performers of this patch. And while you're sharing some, make sure you hit the like and sub buttons. That way you can keep up with everything we're releasing and we know you guys actually find these videos useful. Now it's time to jump right in. Starting with the mid lane, of course, the first champion that I'm going to highlight is Swain. He is being a serious monster on this patch, way more than I thought he actually would, and it's seriously surprising to see changes that didn't seem super significant come out with him so far ahead. Swain players right now are taking Electrocute with Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, Perfect Timing, and Biscuits with double adaptive and armor in their minor runes, and Flash and Ignite. In our Broken Tricks video, I discussed some of the things that would be happening with the meta and why a champion like Swain would actually be really suited in it, but I didn't think it would go this far. It's kinda crazy. While the runes are a bit different to the Conqueror Swain of the past, it's nothing too foreign to the champion, as a long time ago, he did used to prefer Electrocute. The items tell a similar story, where now we're seeing players taking Rod of Ages, Sorc Shoes into Liandry's and then Zhonya's, and finishing things off with a Rabadon's and then a Void Staff. There's a lot of offense here, and he still has really good burst, but don't underestimate a Swain in an extended fight. With his extremely low cooldown Q, burning, and great survivability, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and that's why he's smashing on this patch. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Nocturne, and he's a champion who generally doesn't get too much attention in the mid lane because he has some really easy counterplay in the early stages that can set him super far behind. With that being said, utilizing the build that I actually just went over in our Korean builds video, Nocturne seemed to be doing really well right now. More so than in the past, and there has to be a reason for that. It's too significant of a margin for it to actually be just coincidence. Players are taking Electrocute with Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace with double adaptive and armor in their minor runes, with Flash and Ignite for summoner spells. It's worth mentioning that they're taking double adaptive specifically at all elos, never attack speed, which means that there has to be something special with Nocturne's wave clear interactions that you need the double adaptive for. Otherwise, there should be no reason why he wouldn't prefer the attack speed. The 9 adaptive force isn't going to help your burst out that much compared to getting in an additional auto attack at any point in any trade or all in. With the far more burst oriented runes though, the build also changes, still rushing a Tiamat. However, many times players are opting away from Black Cleaver first and instead going for a Duskblade. That's not to say it's bad, and there are still situations where you will want to build a Black Cleaver first, but that's not what most people are doing. From there, you can upgrade to your boots to a Berserker's, and then grab yourself Edge of Night, and then Guardian Angel, or a Death Stance if you really just want to lifesteal super hard and the enemy isn't going to counter you. And of course, to make that even better, you would upgrade your Tiamat to a Ravenous Hydra to finish your build. The last champion I'm going to talk about in the mid lane as one of the top performers is Zed. And not because he's necessarily the best of the best, he's definitely really damn close, but I want to highlight him because there was a relatively small change that was made that brought him from kinda to basically borderline broken. Getting 2 seconds on his cooldown of his W and a faster W travel speed was all he got on the patch that completely revolutionized his performance, and most people didn't expect it to be significant. But when I'm telling you guys to trust me on these and listen to what I'm making the call on and at least consider it, I do it for a reason. I'm not that stupid. I know what I'm talking about. Right now, Zed can have a really good time into a lot of matchups, and players are finding success by taking Electrocute with Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, Transcendence, and Scorch with double adaptive and armor in their minor runes, and Flash and Ignite. And then for the build, nothing really new is going on here. You're going for a Yumu's or a Duskblade first item, and then picking up whichever one you didn't afterwards. Don't forget to itemize defensive boots either, and then grab yourself an Edge of Night for even more armor penetration, and then a Cleaver for more armor penetration and cooldown reduction. And to continue the armor penetration trend, you need to finish things out with a Lord Dominic's Regards or a Mortal Reminder, whichever one you need. And you know what you need? To go check out our website. But now let's move on to the top lane, because we still have plenty more champions to cover and maybe more to get you interested in. Speaking of champions who got, let's say, small changes or seemingly small changes but actually started smashing with it, Shen is at the top of the top lane right now. this man is crushing it across all elos with the buff that he got on this patch. You want to take Grasp with Shield Bash, Second Wind, Overgrowth, Cheap Shot, and Ravenous Hunter with attack speed and double defensive runes, either armor or MR depending on your matchup. Flash and Teleport should be your summoner spells, and the items are also pretty standard too. What's really carrying Shen is simply the top lane meta being the way that it is, and his shield buff being actually way more significant than it sounds. You want to pick up a Sunfire Cape first, or if you're doing particularly well, a Titanic Hydra and then a Sunfire Cape, then itemizing your defensive boots of Merc Treads or Tabby. Afterwards, you're going to be needing magic resist since you have none, so pick up an adaptive helm or a spirit visage depending on what your team composition is, followed up with a stone plate and then a locket last for great team shielding utility other than just your ultimate. Shen is one of those champions who doesn't really have any problems surviving on his own, so doing this sort of defensive utility itemization for your teammates is actually really powerful. Somehow, in the same breath, Urgot is also able to be dominating the top lane right now, despite a champion like Shen who's pretty effective at stopping him existing in such a strong state. Urgot players are now almost always going press the attack, then Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Bone Plating, and Overgrowth with double adaptive and armor in their minor runes. Don't make the mistake of taking attack speed, you do not need it because of your W. And of course, they take Flash and Teleport. And for the items, there's not much of a change here. You're just going Black Cleaver with Tabby or Merc Shreds and then Death Stance for your core. Don't fall into the trap of buying a Frozen Mallet afterwards. Please, everybody makes that mistake, and it makes me sick. After that Death Stance, you're going to want to buy something like a GA or a Mortal Reminder, and maybe a Spirit Visage if you're just looking for more healing. You also have the option of going something like a Righteous Glory instead for a better engage, which would be kind of similar to what a Frozen Mount would give you, but even better. And with all those item options available to you, you can build a pretty well-rounded Urgot final build, depending on what the enemy team comp calls for you to get. The last top laner that I'm going to talk about is Garen, which is also interesting, because the other two champions who are pretty good right now also do pretty well into Garen. I can't exactly say for sure why these champions aren't really managing to snuff each other out in the top lane, but it goes to show you that a lot of the time, when played properly, these champions have the ability to survive and deal with bad lanes. This is a very good thing for the overall state of top lane. However, everybody kind of needs to be able to get in this sort of bus, otherwise it feels unfair. Garen players are taking Conqueror with Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity, with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in the minor runes, and he is a very aggressive top laner, so you want to take Flash and Ignite. And for items, they're going Triforce into Berserker Greaves just like before, but they're opting away from the Phantom Dancer and instead going more bruisery now, going for a Deadman's and then usually a Death Stance, followed up with a Sterix, and then lastly, a Spirit Visage or an Adaptive Helm. This is a little bit less damage on Garen, but it makes him way harder to kill because you're buying a lot more armor and health, and you still have big shielding and the ability to tank quite a bit because of your Death Stance as you sustain through fights, even when you don't have your shielding and stuff active. Right now, I would say the top lane is relatively stable, but as we move into the jungle and talk about the Bush Boys, that's where things kind of get a little crazy. Because champions really are just smashing each other. There's a lot of very good performers in the jungle, but these are my 3 picks for the people who actually really stand out. First up is going to be Volibear. He's been strong for a while and he continues to perform really well, even as you get closer to higher elos. He's just so hard to actually get away from, and this could be a big problem because of all the CC slowing and other stuff that he has that's extremely irritating without also being able to die since he builds like a tank. For runes on Volibear, you want to go press the attack with Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Nimbus Cloak, and Water Walking with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes with Flash and Smite. For items, you're going Cinderhulk with Tabby or Merc Treads, and if neither of those for some reason are applicable, you can actually go Swifty Boots for the absolute menace movement speed. After that, you want to get a Deadman's and then a Spirit Visage, and if you still actually need Engage, or you just need absolute hard engage, it can't even settle for the Deadman's general movement speed, then you want to pick up a Righteous Glory and get the other stuff afterwards. You can round out your build with a Thornmail to make sure that other people aren't out healing you, because that's the main way that Volibear becomes a big nuisance as you scale with ranks in your W. Now the next champion is one that I am really sad to see existing here because I hate this champion. I despise him with every bone in my body. I have banned him in every single game that I play, and that is Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix is seeing some serious performance benefits from his buffs, and it's not a small performance buff either. These players are going for Dark Harvest with Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Magical Footwear, and Cosmic Insight, and double adaptive and armor in their minor runes. Kha'Zix doesn't actually need attack speed to clear in the jungle well, so make sure you don't fall into that little trap there. And of course, you should be taking Flash and Smite. As far as the item department goes, things haven't really ever changed for him in like, what, 5 years now? He still wants to get a Warriors and then build lethality. You're going for a Duskblade to abuse with your ultimate, and then defensive boots, either Merc Treads or Tabbies depending on the enemy team. Afterwards, Edge of Night is extremely popular because while Yumu's is nice, you don't actually need it since you evolve your W pretty early on, and you have such a big slow that you don't need the extra movement speed to be able to do anything with it. After you get your Edge of Night, then yeah, Yumu's of course for the extra lethality and movement speed because people are getting more mobility as they scale into the game. After that, once you're finishing out your build with your 6th item, if you don't need any more armor penetration, you can go for a Death Stance to make yourself really annoying to deal with. But if you still need more armor penetration, consider a Black Cleaver, a Mortal Reminder, or a Lord Dominik's depending on what you're facing. Kha'Zix is a really adaptable champion, and he does a ton of damage pretty much no matter what. And if you manage to ever find anybody isolated, God help their soul, because you're just gonna erase them from existence in basically 2 abilities. The last jungler who really caught me by surprise, as I didn't expect him to continue to perform this well, is Vi. Ever since her Q got buffed, she's been doing well, but she hasn't fallen off like I thought she would. I thought it was just a period of hype, people were overreacting, maybe they didn't know how to play against her, but no, she's still staying up there and still doing really well. For runes on Vi, you want to take Halo Blades with Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Triumph, and Alacrity, with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes, and of course, Flash and Smite. Since the dawn of Death Stance, Vi has definitely had potential, but now that it's been fully realized as an item that many people can abuse, Vi players are no exception. You're going Warriors with Tabby or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, and then a Triforce into a Death Stance. This gives you a really nice and easy 40% cooldown reduction with amazing combat stats, and you don't have to worry about getting bursted out because of the survivability that Death Stance gives you, buying you time to get abilities off and get shielding from your passive. And if you did need more shielding, that's why you buy Asterix next and finish out your build with a GA. This sets you up to be relevant pretty much no matter what the enemy team can throw at you, assuming that you manage to use your other abilities aside from R properly to avoid things. The other important thing is making sure that you're using your R at the right times to either cancel people's spells, avoid damage or CC, or even follow people as they try to use mobility to escape. With Vi wrapping up the Bushmen, we can move into the bottom lane and start talking about AD carries, and before I jump into any specific AD carry, I want to remind you guys that right now a lot of people are trying to experiment with Muramana on AD carries. However, the overwhelming majority of people aren't actually trying it out right now, so I don't have the stats that I need to tell you guys 100% like, yeah, this is exactly what you buy on the champion. Maybe next time I'll be able to give you a definitive answer, but I did talk about it in the Broken Tricks videos and the Korean builds video where I pointed out this happening on some AD carries. First up in the AD carry lineup, I'm going to be talking about Caitlyn, who just got buffs on the patch, and man, I have never seen a buff that insignificant do so much. And I say insignificant because in reality, it just looks insignificant, right? 2 AD, 5 movement speed, haha, nice meme riot, but nobody could tell me that Caitlyn's win rate would rise by an average of 2% on this patch just from that alone. But when you think about it a bit more and think about just how many AD carries are getting nerf after nerf after nerf, you start to realize that these champions are just about to take any single crumb they can get, and it might be what they need to be able to press their lead and take over the laning phase. And Caitlyn is no exception, as one of the highest range champions in the game and one of the best pushing / sieging / taking tower champions in the game. Caitlyn players are finding the most success with Fleet Footwork, Presence of Mind, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Gathering Storm with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in their minor runes. For items, they're taking Infinity Edge into Berserker Greaves, into Rapid Fire Cannon, and then Storm Razor with Phantom Dancer and Death Dance wrapping out the build. This is a really high damage build that focuses on catching people out with traps at the right times. However, as you transition into the late game, you're going to be really safe, as the Storm Razor slow is great for peeling yourself, you have the shielding from Phantom Dancer, and the survivability that Death Dance grants you. It's not going to be the highest damage thing against tanks, but it will be very good in team fights where you don't really need to burn through them super quickly. Next up, I'm going to talk about Ashe, who kinda is the opposite of that, taking Lethal Tempo with Presence of Mind, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Magical Footwear, and Approach Velocity with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in the minor runes, with of course Flash and Heal. The items here are pretty standard as they have been for a while, with Blade of the Ruined King into Berserker Greaves and then Renon's Hurricane into Infinity Edge, giving you your 50% crit, increased damage on your frost shot enemies, great movement speed, great multi-hit damage, and of course, great kiting and great chasing. Once you grab those 3 core items in your boots, you want to make sure that you grab a death stance for as much survivability as you can get in a single item, because really that's the only thing you're lacking from this build. And lastly, you can pick up an armor penetration item like Mortal Reminder, or if you really need to survive even more, maybe a Phantom Dancer would be a right fit. The last AD carry I'm going to be talking about is Jhin, who's finding a lot of success with Fleet Footwork, Presence of Mind, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Gathering Storm, with adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. Remember, he does not benefit from the attack speed as much as the adaptive. For items, you're looking to pick up an Infinity Edge and then Swifty Boots with Rapid Fire Cannon and Storm Razor, a lot like Caitlyn, but of course a little bit differently with that Jhin flair. Swifty Boots have been a classic for a really long time on him. And after you grab that Storm Razor, you're looking for a Death Stance and then a Mercurial Scimitar. This will give you great survivability as the Death Stance gives you resistances, and of course Mercurial Scimitar to make sure that anybody who's trying to stop you from becoming the fast fails in their effort. Now that AD carry is wrapped up, we can move on to support, which is going to start out with somebody who might be a little familiar to you if you watched from the beginning of the video. I'm of course talking about Swain, as Swain support is also doing really well at the same time as Swain mid thanks to the buffs, and they build very similarly. You're going to want to take Electrocute with Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, Perfect Timing, and Biscuits with adaptive, and armor in your minor runes, and Flash Ignite, because Swain is actually pretty aggressive in the early game as he catches people out with his E. Since you're doing that, you are going to want to build Spell Thieves as a first item instead of Relic Shield, which most Enchanter style and safe playing supports do now because they want the consistency of executing minions. And from there, you rush a Liandry's because you want as much burn and damage as you possibly can get. Afterwards, make sure you pick up Sword Shoes for magic penetration, and then a Zanya's as it is your only defensive tool. While your ultimate is really great, usually you're lacking in levels and stuff that you need in order to make it truly oppressive and make you super hard to kill. Zanya's really helps you out in that regard. After your Zanya's, make sure you pick up a Rylai's to have synergy with the Liandry's and make it very hard to escape from you, and lastly, a Rabadon's, because your goal is to deal damage when you're playing Swain support. The next support who's doing very well is somebody who's kind of been riding under the radar for a long time, but he's been consistent, and with other supports taking a hit, he's coming up again right now. I'm talking about Maokai. You're taking Aftershock with Font of Life, Second Wind, Revitalize, Biscuits, and Time Warp Tonic with CDR, Magic Resist, and Armor in your minor runes, blending a lot of scaling and defensive stats there. Even though that's what you're going for, you still do want to take Flash and Ignite because it's very good on Maokai, as he does get a lot of opportunities to go in and potentially kill people in the early levels, especially if they're squishy champions that he's up against. You might not have as much luck trying to kill something like, I don't know, an Alistar compared to a Soraka or a Sona. To complement the rune build, you're going to want to grab Relic Shield with Tabbies, Merc Treads, or potentially Swifties if the enemy team doesn't have anything that really looks nice to counter those with, and then immediately grab yourself a Zeke's to empower whoever is auto-attacking the most on your team, and follow that up with a Knight's Vow to make sure that that person has the best day they possibly can. And since your whole goal is to get really big on Maokai after that point, you should buy a Warmogs as you do have good defensive stats already, and then finish it up with a Locket for more defensive utility for you and your team. Maokai is a pretty simple support, especially compared to something like Swain, but that doesn't make him any less effective. The last support is somebody who was at the top alongside Janna in the past, but since Janna got a little bit of a nerf and doesn't do as well into some of the champions who are becoming more popular, we're seeing Sona doing really well right now. I honestly was surprised when I saw her doing super well, even into the very high elos, but as it is, she's smashing the competition. You want to take Airy with Mana Flow, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, Presence of Mind, and Cut Down with CDR, Adaptive, and Armor in your minor runes. Sona is a very adaptable champion, and that's why your summoner spells should oscillate between Ignite, Heal, and Exhaust, of course combined with Flash. You want to make sure that you're picking the right one for the right situation, depending on what AD carry you have and what the matchup is. Because Sona's spell ranges are high, when you're building items you can actually start with a Spell Thieves almost all the time, as you will get your procs off a lot and get wards quicker than you can with Relic Shield. Then you can go into your Lucidity Boots, Athenes, and then if you are in a really good spot, you should be upgrading the early Dark Seal that you buy into a Mage Eyes as you continue to garner free assists from helping your allies. If you didn't do that already or you didn't know about that, you should be doing that on just about any Enchanter support that you can. Nami, Lulu, Janna, and Sona are great examples of this, as they benefit from the AP a lot, and getting it for free is the best case scenario that you could be asking for. If you aren't going for a Mage Eyes though, you're going to want to get an Ardent instead, and then a Redemption. If you didn't get the Mage Eyes, then you still have one slot left, so you could go something like a Shirelia's or a Locket depending on what scenario you're looking at in front of you. And with that, that is all the top performers for patch 10.15. To find guides on a lot of the champions that I covered in this video, and guides on a lot more than just champions, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com, where we have guides that are all done by challenger level players. Our whole goal is to teach you guys how to be better at League so that you can win your games. And right now, there's no better time to check us out as we have a summer sale going on right now. Make sure you guys share what you think about the picks in the comments, and of course, as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.